again.
I'm actually not part of the panel, but should I take down my background?
You're good, you're good.
Okay.
And Vimuth just was presenting on the NUS FinTech Society's use of a DAO. So they use a governance token to do their voting at the FinTech Society. Pretty cool.
Wow.
Let's see. Hi, Jun Xiong. Welcome. Let's see here. And Manjula, you were doing M&A before with Shell. So this is quite a shift.
This is the story. This is like you can change. You can come to the light.
Well, that's very
I'm a
good.
testament to that.
Yeah.
Multiple peaks, right? Lifelong learning.
There is a different way.
That is so cool. So you've seen the inside, so that's
Right.
even more credibility.
Right.
Although I will say their stock prices has been on a tear. You know, it's been up and up for the oil and gas since last year, which is interesting.
Okay, right.
Kind of makes you wonder. What- Is it
No,
because
I haven't been with them for a long time.
is it because they are doing more and more green, or
Yeah. Well, actually, they are, to be fair, and they need to do more, but you know, that is one of the reasons, yeah.
What time are we starting? No?
we usually give people just one more minute, Dan and Dean, just one more minute.
Oh no, I was just asking because I see whether I have time to go to the pantry, but I guess not.
I was tempted to ask how
You're the
far is the
moderator,
pantry,
you
but
get this time. I think that's fine. He needs to go to the pantry.
yeah,
Yeah, go ahead, Dean. It's fine.
go ahead, Dean. Go ahead,
Yeah.
please. Get water or something.
Get water.
Yes,
'Cause
yes.
you'll probably have a lot of questions later.
These days, the pantry is just to the left. You know, you can reach into the refrigerator from our Zoom rooms a lot of times. Welcome, everyone. You're welcome to turn on your cameras. We're going to be starting in just a few minutes here. And of course, since this is all about career and growth and mindset and ultimately networking, it may be even, it's a good opportunity to connect with some of the speakers today. So always good to say hello. And also we're going to start off with a picture anyway. Hello, Kenneth. I saw Kenneth was there. Thanks. Kenneth is one of our volunteers. Hi, Sophia. Thanks for joining us. Benjamin, thanks for coming in.
Hi, Prof. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. It's great. Hey, Raymond. It's nice to see a few cameras on. It feels like a starry night that, you know, a few smiling faces are here and there in the night sky. Hey, Getty.
Hello.
Getty's been one of the folks that's been helping to organize the Talent Pavilion, working very hard.
Under the leadership of Keith and everyone, the team here.
Hey, Don.
Hey Keith, nice to see you.
Nice to see you again, too. Yeah, it looks like Dean, the pantry wasn't too far away, so we'll get started. Okay, welcome everyone. Does the future belong to the young? This is the panel we're going to be going through today, and I'm joined with the esteemed speakers, Patrick Tay, and Patrick is our Assistant Secretary General at NTUC and Member of Parliament representing the Pioneer Estate, and he also looks at education. You may have recently read in the Straits Times a great review him and his team had done on employment for mid-careers. So we'll get to hear some of that today from Patrick. He's also a dear friend and we keep seeing each other on panels throughout the entire year. So it's always nice to see his bright smile here. Thanks for joining us, Patrick. We're also joined by Manjula, and she started her career in M&A over in Shell, Australia, which is pretty neat because she knows the inside to the companies that are trying to go green. But now she's also founded Worldwide Generation, which helps facilitate the future of sustainability. And she's working closely even with the Singapore government, with the City of London, and companies and governments around the world, advising them on how to make sustainability not just the top objective to talk about, but then how to achieve those objectives. Thanks for joining us, Manjula.
Pleasure, nice to be here.
We're also joined by Dean Tong. He's the group head of human resources at UOB. And he hung out in a fun part of town in the United States for a while at the Wharton School, which is where he did his MBA. And that means that he knows how to get out of sticky situations and fight his way out. Well, okay, it's not that bad. These are things, stories and myths about the US, right, Dean? It was all quiet during that time, I'm sure. But he's come in to share his 22 years of transformation, leadership, and talent development. Thanks for joining us, Dean.
Thanks for having me.
And we have Danny Cole, who heads up Spencer Stewart for Asia. Spencer Stewart is one of the worldwide and world-renowned executive recruiting agencies. So he's looking at, well, how do we build talent? How do we place talent and more? He's been principal of the Beijing and Singapore offices for the Boston Consulting Group, which I believe you and Dean also worked together at some point, right?
Yes,
Yes. So they know each other from BCG. And he helps CEOs with their managing for succession and searches throughout Asia. So I'm excited to have him on the roundtable today to give us some of the inside look at what our senior leaders looking for, what a company's looking for in talent as well. Looking forward to hear your tips, Danny.
Very, very good. Thanks for the introduction. Look forward to the discussion.
Likewise. Let me turn it over. The speakers will first give a bit of an introductory remarks, and we'll start off with Patrick. Patrick, over to you.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Patrick Tay. As Keith so kindly introduced, I'm with the Labour Movement, the National Trades Unions Congress in Singapore, and I would like to use the next couple of minutes, thanks to Keith giving me the opportunity to air some intro remarks on what's happening in the state of the labour market in Singapore. And I thought I'd use this opportunity to give my thoughts and of course give you all a heads up on what's happening, and really a big thank you to everyone who's behind today's session. I know there's a lot of hard work behind it, including the publicity efforts in the journey towards today. But I thought I'd use this opportunity that this afternoon to share with you some key highlights, because actually the last 3 weeks have been an exciting time for the labour market, because there were quite a neat number of announcements, quite a few things that have been announced, policy changes, legislative changes, and of course quite a number of few pronouncements in particularly in the space of manpower and the labor market. I would like to just kick off by saying, MOM just released its third quarter advanced labor market release 3 weeks ago. And well, positive signs. Yeah, our unemployment rate is, well, it's come down a bit, but I say it with a bit of a, caution, because even though it has come down a bit, but I think we are still not out of the woods. As you know, we are still in the midst of the various measures, in the midst of pandemic and the various measures to try to get the, back to the next normal and endemic status. So therefore, we still see some of the more deeply impacted sectors still quite in the doldrums, unfortunately. Yes, aviation, aerospace, some glimmer of hope with some of the opening of travel lines and lanes. And that's what's happening. And more importantly, although there are those deeply impacted sectors, we are starting to see companies, there are more companies formed than there are that have went insolvent, as you have read in newspapers in the last couple of days. But more importantly is that there are still sectors that are doing fairly good. And I'm glad that I see that my various panelists and some of you who are in this space, definitely in the financial sector, it's doing much better than many other sectors. Very fortunate. I think in the modern services sector, i.e. Financial sector, insurance, infocom technology, as well as professional services, is doing very much better than expected. And I think I'm rather bullish about these few sectors. And therefore, today's, or should I say this week's Singapore FinTech Festival, as well as this Talent Pavilion, is so apt in that we're going to discuss shortly, probably, on skills, talents, and opportunities in this space, not just for new entrants, those who want to find out more about this sector, segue into this sector, or even do some career transition. So I think it's positive out there. So that's the first announcement. The second announcement is actually just last week on Tuesday, we passed the Retirement and Re-employment Act, which has raised both retirement ages and re-employment ages come next year in July 2022. It will be raised from 62 to 63, and of course from 67 to 68 for re-employment age. So I think that's one major legal change, which also means that it's a recognition of the fact that in particularly in Singapore, we have an aging population and an aging workforce. In fact, well, sadly or pessimistically, we are facing imminent burning of candles at both ends. One end with a longer life expectancy and an aging population. The other end with a very, very low fertility rate in Singapore. We are like 1.1, one of the lowest in the world. So that's something which all of us can in some way contribute. But again, in the next couple of years, one big threat we will be facing will be the fact that our workforce employment growth will be going to the negative. So that's imminent, and therefore this change in the legislation is one way to mitigate the effects of that. The third major thing, which is well, as part of the legislative changes and policy announcements, is that the workforce, you all know, is aging. But at the same time, I think two big challenges face Singapore or confront Singapore. Firstly, is a structural unemployment challenge. Structural meaning that, well, we have jobs, but we don't have the people with the right skills and experiences to take on those jobs. So that's sort of like a mismatch, a structural mismatch of sorts, not just of skills, but also sometimes of expectations, either from the employee or from the employer. So that exacerbates it, and of course causes the unemployment rate to still stay at this level and not going down, as rapid as we would like. Fourthly, we just released the National Wages Council's guidelines just last week, and therefore that's kind of like an indication that if you look at some of the details there, some of the indications that our labor market is getting a bit better. So those companies that are doing better, reward your employees fairly and well. But at the same time, also we understand that amidst us are still many lower wage workers. So that's one aspect where we put a bit of a more emphasis to see how employers can give a leg up to many of the lower wage workers who are actually in essential services. Many of them in essential services, and many of them have powered and saw us through this last 18 months. And finally, the PME Task Force report, which was just announced on 22nd October. Keith alluded to that, I co-chair this PME Task Force, which is a joint task force between NTUC and the Singapore National Employers Federation. And there's some interesting stuff to be gleaned from that report. It's a 60-page report. I put it on LinkedIn, but later I'll probably drop a link to that PDF document, which you can digest. We have interviewed and engaged in focus groups and discussions with more than 10,000 professionals, managers, executives, different sectors, public, industrial service, different levels of the hierarchy, different ages, different genders. And it's very representative. And later we'll talk a bit more about it when we do the Q&A and the panel discussion. And I'll dive a bit more into the findings as well as some of the recommendations. If not, that's the opener, and back to you, Keith.
Thank you, Patrick. And Don has already asked a question in the chat. That was quick. So Patrick, if you want to take a look at that question in the chat there, he said, structurally, which is the bigger challenge, skills or experience?
The answer is skills.
Okay.
We'll talk a bit more about that later, or if you want to.
Thank you. That's a quick one. All right. Let's go over to Manjula. Can you give us an introduction, Manjula?
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you so much for having me on this panel. Coming to you from COP26 in Scotland. For those of you who know, that's a big climate conference going on around the world. All the world leaders are here speaking today. So great to be here. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. So I really do love you guys. Anyway, so the best way I can probably give my intro is to tell you a little bit about my story, and I'd like to make some remarks along the way. So a year before I went to university, the oil company that I worked for looked at their 15 directors, and they were all white male, over 40, British, Dutch. And they said, you know, we've got to do something about this. We have to turn this around. It's been like this for, you know, decades. And so they came looking for someone like me to my school. I was in a backwater school in Melbourne, Australia, and they found me. And at the age of 17, I was selected by the company on a fast track leadership program. I was going to do law, but actually ended up doing business systems at Monash University. So point number one was, if you're in this discussion and you are a leader of an organization or a recruitment firm, number one is diversity was the key to changing the trajectory of my life, but also the trajectory of the company that I was working for, which was stuck in its ways. And so that was point number one. And point number two was I ended up doing business systems. This becomes important a bit later in the story. And anyway, ended up having an incredible trajectory and journey with this company. And even though I loved working for the company, I had an epiphany about 3 years into, you know, my career was, is this actually what I want to do with my life? Is this my actual calling and my purpose? And I'd seen poverty and justice my whole life. And I now was working for one of the biggest, richest oil companies in the world. And it was just something that I had to reconcile with and say, is this actually what I want to do? And so point number two is always have a reference point for your life. So from where you make those decisions, the backbone of those decision making, and the pain of discipline is far less than the pain of regret. So actually you can always retrain yourself to do something else, but the regretting that you didn't, you know, make those changes is far more painful in life. And so point number two is that. And so went to my mentor, who was the vice president of Shell, and said, look, I know you've invested heavily into me, but I'm not sure if this is for me and this is my calling. And I was going to resign. And actually he was fantastic. And again, to leaders in companies, he said, why don't you take a year sabbatical and go and find yourself? And if you come back to us, you're even more valuable to us. And if you don't, you go with our blessings. So that's point number two, is that take this time to do a sabbatical, go and find yourself, go and do other things, and see if what is aligned to your purpose, and you know, and really ask yourself, why was I born? Why am I here on the earth? You know, what am I meant to be doing with my life? What can I contribute? And anyway, kind of long story short, the year sabbatical turned into 17 years in practically the wilderness, trying to really have this grapple with, like, why have we got the levels of inequality, injustice? You know, I could see 3 billion people living on $2.50 a day. I could see the greatest levels of inequality just rising and rising, where 1% of the 1% were actually controlling the wealth and opportunities. And then because of my background in the environmental space, I could see that we were running out of time, where the climate was just increasing and increasing. What we were doing to the planet was, you know, really going to leave nothing for the next generation. So I'm speaking to now you as the next generation, that my piece was like, what if I could just help preserve the planet and actually make it better for the next generation than when I found it. And so the 17 years ended up working in the nonprofit sector, working with governments, and then ended up advising into the United Nations around the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And there it was, we had to deliver the SDGs this decade. For those that know, does everyone know about the SDGs? They need to be delivered this decade. We are it. We are the 21st century generation that has to deliver it. We can't move them out another 15 years. Anyway, again, a very long story. I was basically saying to all the economists and the management consultants around the table, I said, you know, what do we have to do to deliver this? And they said, we have to unlock something like 2.5 trillion of extra capital per year to deliver this. And I said, well, that's not going to happen unless the proper capital markets play a role and the private sector play a role. And the only way that they play a role is if there's some sort of return on investment. And so my first question is, has anyone proven the economic argument of sustainability? And like, actually, good question. No. And so that was where I started Worldwide Generation. I said, what if I could? I'd seen every broken system. So my fourth point is that systems thinking, for all of you that are thinking about changing careers or solving problems, whether they're through technology or otherwise, everything has to be solved systemically. You can't be solving problems just with band-aid fixes anymore. We have everything that we do, look to systems and look to systems thinking. So basically create Worldwide Generation. And then I realized that there was 3 huge problems. No one could execute, no one could get access to trusted, comparable, real-time data, and no one could measure impact. And that basically led to, what if the only thing I could think of was some sort of technology platform that could do this, and reinvented myself and became a technology entrepreneur and a fintech entrepreneur. And so my final piece is, if I can do it from no background in technology, I'm a woman of color, I had to reinvent myself many, many times, but purpose propelled me. When you have purpose and you align yourself to purpose, and your purpose is to make yourself better, a better version of yourself, and make the planet a better version of itself, to impact society and the planet, the universe meets you halfway, and this is possible and this can happen. So I hope that just inspires some remarks for, does the future belong to the young? 100%, it belongs to you, and we want you to be part of this solution now, where the world really needs you. So,
thank you, Manjula. Thank you so much for that. Oh, what a walkthrough that you've gone through, from Shell to Worldwide Generation, and more to share around that as well. Over to you, Danny. Can you take us through your introductory remarks?
Sure. So maybe I'll start with three key themes, right, that I'd like to emphasize in my sort of life story a little bit, and then bring it to life through some of the experiences I've gone through. The 3 themes are, number 1, okay, I really do firmly believe that education is a lot more about learning about how to learn than just gaining knowledge and experience in a certain subject, like what we study in school, right? So that's number 1. Number 2 is don't be afraid to reinvent yourself and to continue to learn, because that's really how continue to stay relevant. So on that front, I would argue that yes, the future can belong to the young, but not necessarily so. I think it would belong to anybody who is willing to learn and to continue to reinvent himself or herself. And last but not least, always find ways to make a difference, because that will give you the confidence and also the energy to continue to trudge ahead, even when things are tough. So with that, let me give you a brief introduction about my life story. So I actually grew up as a bit of a geek. I fell in love with math and physics when I was a teenager. And from that point on, I thought that my destiny was to become a physicist, to uncover the secrets of the deepest secrets of the universe. So as a result, I studied physics in undergrad and went on to do a PhD. And I had a great time, right? Doing a lot of math, doing a lot of physics. But what happened was that along the way, as I was going through my PhD, I found that I was learning more and more about less and less until I almost knew almost everything about almost nothing. So I told myself, you know what? This may not be exactly what I want to do for the rest of my life, because it was getting a bit too dry and deep. So at that time, I mean, as I was doing a lot of soul searching, I went to a lot of presentations. At that time, a lot of the top consulting firms was really looking for top PhDs from the schools in the US. I went to the presentations and I was pleasantly surprised, because I never knew that through their presentations, I never knew that business can be done in a very scientific way in terms of having a hypothesis and then breaking down the hypothesis into smaller problems and then attacking those smaller problems with data, with information, right, with insights from the market. So I was like, wow, that's exactly like doing science. So I came to the realization that maybe what I really loved was doing problem solving, and physics was just an avenue for me to express my love for problem solving. And as a result of that, I made the plunge into management consulting. It was actually quite a daunting sort of plunge that I did, because all my life I thought I was going to be a physicist, but now overnight I have to develop much more sort of interpersonal skills. I need to work on a much tighter deadlines when in the real world. And I need to work in a much more team environments. So it was a struggle, to be frank, initially, but I persevered. And over time, I actually picked up a lot of the soft skills needed to be successful. And as a result of that, I've worked in the US for a number of years in a startup consulting firm. We got acquired, and then I decided that I actually wanted to do something different. So I actually joined this firm called Boston Consulting Group in Beijing. So I was in Beijing for about 3 years and was exposed to just a completely new universe in Beijing. And work with numerous companies to solve their most pressing management issues. And then along the way too, after spending 3 years there, I came out to Singapore, BCG, and worked a lot in Jakarta, doing some transformation from large companies. And then, so that was all going well. I was able to do problem solving in a much more pragmatic setting and getting good results for my clients. And then one day, I got a call from Spencer Stewart, and of course at that time I was like, I was pretty happy, but I said, nevertheless, let's just explore anyway, right, out of curiosity. And along the way, I had another epiphany, which was maybe doing what we do at Spencer Stewart was even the better and more sustainable way to create long-term value for my clients. And here's why. I mean, because as I reflected on what I was doing as a management consultant, there are really three things that we do. One is to help solve the client problem, figuring out what the problem is and come up with some recommendations to solve it. And that'll be a nice deck that you produce. So I have to tell the client what's the problem and what you could go and do about it. But more and more, clients want more than that. Clients want us to actually implement the solution to ensure that whatever we recommend actually works in practice, and we are seeing the impact on the numbers. But beyond that too, clients actually want us to actually implement enable the teams at the client side so that they don't have to keep the consultants around forever. So as I was reflecting upon that, I came to the realization that yes, the consultants can do everything in terms of doing the training, putting in the processes and systems, but unless we have the right leadership in place to keep rallying the troops, to keep refreshing the strategy, and to keep evolving the organization, a lot of the things that we do as a consultant will actually evaporate the time we leave. So that's when I thought that maybe coming to Spencer Stewart, doing a lot of the things that we do in terms of placing the top management at the right place at the right time to turn around an organization, to grow an organization, think of a new business model, will be extremely meaningful and a much better way to create long-term value. And so here I am. It's been 10 years now, but once again, I mean, as you can probably see, I've changed completely from a geek who was basically facing a computer every day, right, writing code on supercomputers to crunch data from NASA satellites, to what I'm doing right now, essentially, meeting people all the time and understanding their business issues and figuring out how to find the best talent and find the best way to transform the organization to create results. But the constant is really that is this ability to continue to learn and to reinvent ourselves. Because you may argue that I'm not using anything that I learned by doing a PhD in astrophysics. I don't study date stars anymore. I don't program computers anymore. But I can tell you that the most important thing that at least I picked up when I was doing a PhD is the fact that, number one, I learned how to define ambiguous problems and put some structure around it so that we can attack it in a systematic and manageable way. I learned tenacity. I learned fearlessness in terms of approaching tough problems that, hey, even though it may seem impossible, there is a way if you just sit down and collect your thoughts and find creative ways to go around it. And I learned perseverance. Sometimes when you solve real life problems, there's no perfect answer, unlike a textbook problem in the exam, right? The toughest exam that you have come across in your past in your entire life, may be really tough, but there's one thing that you know for sure, there's always a textbook answer sitting somewhere. Whereas in the real life problem, they may not be a perfect solution. So do you look for a 50% solution that's more implementable, that's more pragmatic, or do you keep on going for your perfect solution, which may not work? So making that trade-off is also a very important skill that I picked up when I was doing my PhD. So a lot of these life lessons actually are extremely just common threads that have actually allowed me to continue to transform and reinvent myself along the way. And I really hope that sort of we all look at education as really gaining those core skills, those core mindset changes, and those core competencies that allow us to continue to transform ourselves. Because that, if you can do that, then yes, I think the future belongs to all of us.
Thank you so much, Danny. And really, tenacity, fearless, perseverance, your three keywords. But I also liked how you said you were learning more and more about less and less. That's the interesting conundrum that you were facing there. Well, this is being so specific and an expert. Well, let's go to, and Don has a question for you, Danny.
Yeah.
What skill is in most demand that can't be easily and quickly supplied?
Well, I mean, if you look at a lot of my clients, right, they're looking for people who really has that, in the organization. Yes, you need to be sharp, right? You need to understand the business problems, but collaboration influencing is becoming increasingly important, because one thing that we know is that the world is becoming so complex, right? Technology is changing the world at such a fast pace. Businesses are becoming very complex, and nobody knows it all. Right, so typically the best people are not necessarily the ones who are the sharpest, who have all the answers. They're the ones who are able to collaborate and influence, work with others, know what their blind spots are, and be willing to admit it, and actually bring in others who can actually help them along the way, so that they can, as a team, can actually solve the tougher problem.
Danny, I love that answer. And I see a few people with their cameras on that are excellent examples of collaborators and influencers. So if you look around the room, get to know each other to find out who they are, though. That's right. So Dean, over to you for your introductory remarks.
Thank you. There's already so much of things to unpack from the three earlier speakers. Let me try to cover two things in my introduction. The first, bit of my life history. I promise it will not be as deep as Danny's. And second one is what I think about whether the future belongs to the young. Now, first of all, I came from a small town called Penang in Malaysia. I never went out of the country for the first part of my life until I actually graduated from university. My watch is talking to me. The first time I flew was when I actually went down to do my interview with the Boston Consulting Group, the same consulting firms that Danny joined. I always thought I was a geek just like Danny. And in fact, the word that I used was a nerd, right? But when I joined the Boston Consulting Group, I realized that I was not the biggest nerd in the world. And in fact, there was a concentration on nerds in the place, and Danny is an example of that. And I fell in love with the place. So I stayed there for 20 plus years before I actually went into a short retirement. So upon leaving BCG, I thought about taking a completely different path. Right? I was traveling Monday to Friday for most part of my life before then. And I quit the job and I went into I started my PhD at St. Gallen in Switzerland. I started teaching at SMU with St. Gallen. And I went to the hospice to volunteer myself. I say, hey, I have all these skill sets, people pay me good money for it. What do you want me to do? And they told me, there's no need for your skills here. That we are a simple organization. But what we need are a hairdresser who can cut the hair of the patients here. So I was about to sign up for a hairstyling class when it hit me that this is not the best use of my experience in the past. And so when the opportunity from UOB came about, I realized that I found the platform to do what I wanted to do. Was similar to what Manjula, you have said, right? I found my purpose. But to realize your purpose, you need a platform. And I found that platform through UOB. Now, let me share with you what I think about the future, whether it belongs to the young. I don't. And let me explain. Right. First, if you look at what Patrick has said about the aging population, today in Singapore, and you look across the region, roughly about 14-15% of the population about 65 years and above. And this is projected to grow up to 25% by 2030, right? I mean, the measures are there. I mean, you cannot run away from that. So 1 in 4 people will be 65 years and above. Second trend that you see is that the war on talent. And this is something that in the financial services we're experiencing very keenly. And it's actually driving out salaries, very good for everyone who are looking for jobs in financial services, but not so good for the long-term viability of the industry because productivity is not catching up as quickly as how the wages are actually moving, right? So if you think about it, there's actually a need to involve more than the new people who can actually build the technology. You actually need to extend the pool of resources to include the larger available productive workforce as well. And the third trends we are seeing, and that's something that has happened for a while, the whole digital transformation or the digitization of the industry that we're seeing, right? And the pandemic has only accelerated that speed. We're seeing it within UOB, we're seeing it in the industry, we're seeing it across the market as well. So with these 3 things that I've just said, right, the point I'm trying to make is that there is going to be a need for everyone in the workforce in the future. So we are looking at a multi-generation workforce in the future. So in the past, we are working in sort of multi-generation as well. But now you actually have very young and also those who in the past would have retired, and now they're coming back to the workforce as well. And the challenge is, how do we put them together to be coexisting and to be collaborating towards the same goal? And that's the key challenge that we have to unlock as an organization, as a country, to really allow us to get the best of this. And that's my opening. Back to you, Keith.
Thank you so much, Dean. And what a nice question to end on there. How do we have the generations work together well, especially as people return? That's so true. Dean took a strong stance that the future does not belong to the young. Well, let's see how this turns out here. And everyone, you're welcome. Thank you so much, Don, for bringing questions in early. Everyone is welcome to bring in questions throughout this time. And I wouldn't hold back if I was you. This is a great opportunity. I'll start off though with one. So you've mentioned, a couple have mentioned actually, the COVID-19 impact. And Dean, I'll just come back to you right away. So you said that that's been raising salaries. That sounds like a good prospect, but you said there's some risks of sustainability there and more. How has this impacted some of the junior levels in terms of coming in for their so-called future of work? And one last question on this, impact on junior levels, but then impact also on budgets to, as you say, make things more productive. What does that mean that a young person is going to be looking to do when they come to UOB?
So they are actually always two sides of the coin. They are the positive that we have seen from the pandemic, and there's the not so positive, right? Let me start off with the positive. What the pandemic has done is that it has actually leveled the playing field in a lot of ways, right? So in the past, the junior person is the one that sits at the corner. Right now, you get the same real estate on the screen as a senior person, right? And at UOB, I made it a point that for every conversation that I have, you have to turn on your video because we are already losing the physical presence. We must have at least the visual to connect with each other. So now there's actually a equal opportunity for a junior person to actually voice their opinion as well. Now, given the rapid adoption of technology, we know that the newer generation, the junior, are the ones that are most open to adopting some of this technology. So it is giving them an advantage, if you will, right, to show what they can do, and so also teach the next generation as a result of that. And if you go back to the job, in terms of where we're seeing a lot of the vacancies, it is really in the area of technology, and this is where a lot of the young people are actually coming on board. So salary levels are increasing. There are a lot more jobs that are being offered in the market today in this space. So these are all the good news. Now, however, as I said before, there are some downside to it. One of the things that we're seeing is that, unlike in the past, where you spend some time with an organization to deepen your skills before you actually move on, right now the temptation is very strong, right? That before you have mastered certain skills, a next generation will actually be tapping on your shoulder, and people like Danny, for example, is facilitating this process. We are using Danny as well as part of the facilitation, so I'm also guilty of that, right? That people are actually moving around a lot quicker than before. Now, moving around itself is not a problem, but if you're moving around before you have actually garnered enough learning in an organization, very soon you're going to end up with a collection of experience, but no depth in any place. And that could be a very dangerous areas in the future. Now, one of the questions that was earlier asked was that what will be a very important skill set for the future? Now, I can tell you today, even in the areas of technology we're seeing, right, between the people who are doing and the people who are managing, the difference is the soft skills, right? So you can get technology people, you can produce many of them, but the differentiation for you to grow your career and to be more relevant in the future is to really grow the soft skills. And what soft skills am I talking about here? You start off with problem solving, what Danny mentioned earlier, right? One of the skill sets that we picked up from BCG is problem solving, right? A structured way of problem solving, confidence that every problem has a solution. You go in, you break it down into parts, and you tackle it one by one. This is something that can be picked up. But a lot of people sort of shy away from it because they either have no confidence or they have no training to doing some of those. Second skill set will be part of the interpersonal, if you will, storytelling. Are you able to share your thoughts, to a large audience or different types of audience, not only technical audience, but business people or different level, right? How can you vary your story and tell it in a compelling and engaging manner to the others? And if you talk about collaboration, also one of the key requirements, and that means the ability to empathize, to actually listen and relate to others. This is something that you have to expose yourself out there. People who are more introverted, like myself, for example, right? You need a deliberate effort to put yourself out there, and so that you can actually build up these skill sets. Right. So these are things which are going to be more and more important. If you don't stay long enough with an organization, you don't have the opportunity to really deepen that. Then you move around, you increase your salary, but over time, do you really build skills, both hard skills as well as some of the soft skills that we are talking about? Back to you, Keith.
Thank you, Dean. Patrick, can I ask you to come in on what Dean was just talking about in terms of these skills and the situation. And then Danny,
Yeah.
before you come off mute, so I'll come right over to
Sure,
you.
sure. Yeah, thanks, Keith, and thanks, Dean, for your sharing. I can't agree more with some of the points that have been raised by the few of them. I just want to chime in as well. I think definitely, well, some people call it soft skills, some people call it life skills, but these are very, very important. In fact, the World Economic Forum has already fleshed out, well, a couple of years ago, some of the key skills that we need to navigate the future, even without COVID-19. I think these are continue to be very, very important. In fact, we have done quite a number of surveys with professional managers, executives, including head honchos and different segments and different sectors and different levels of hierarchy. And I just want to corroborate on some of the points that have been raised. I think three key, very important life skills have been just shared. I think they are communication, collaboration. These two are definitely very, very important. And of course, increasingly, even in the fintech space, complex problem solving. Not just problem solving, but complex problem solving. So I think these three are very, very important. Of course, the WEF gave one more C, is called the creative thinking. But otherwise, I would say communicate, particularly in the Asian context, communication is very, very important. Particularly now that we don't have face-to-face meetings with virtual kind of like meetings, communication is ever more important. How you convince your clients, internal, external stakeholders and clients and customers, very, very important. I think communication, I can't emphasize more. Collaboration, not just within the company, it's cross departments. Well, we need to get out the silo effect. I think that's one thing I noticed in this COVID-19 pandemic has brought people in different sectors and industries together. They realize they cannot hunt and kill alone. They need to do it, hunt as a pack. And I do see more collaboration within sectors, industries, because of the various challenges. They have to work together to leverage on each other's strength and reap the economies of scale. So I think, I just want to weigh in on the fact that these three C's are very, very important: communication, complex problem solving, and collaboration. But I realized that the other three of my panel members have answered your question on, whether the future belongs to the young. I did not answer it, but I kind of subtly hinted at it by fleshing out or sharing some of the stats and labor market findings. I think there are a lot of things that we are doing. I think for the simple fact that we realize because we are burning the candles at both ends, and we are not getting enough young people. So therefore, the future don't just belong to the young, but the not so young as well. So it's going to be a combination of the young and not so young for some of the reasons which Dean has already alluded to. I think it's very, very important that we maximize every single human capital that we can find. And of course, not just human capital, the skills, the innate skills and the newly picked up skills. So this is very important. As I shared earlier, I think one of the biggest challenges, well, at least for Singapore, but I wouldn't just say for Singapore, because I've interacted with many of our counterparts in the labor movements in Australia, in the UK, in Europe, in Scandinavian countries, including America. I think they all recognize, and there's a unanimous recognition that we need to really build up skills and training. Yeah, and really, because for the simple fact that the half-life of skills is shortening so rapidly. And to use a physics example, yeah, the half-life of skills shortening, and really there's really a need for everyone to stay on that, to embrace learning, not just the mainstream academic learning, but really the continuous education and training. So increasingly we are trying to move away from what we call institutes of higher learning to institute of continuing education and training, because I think whether it's universities or polytechnics or even training providers or even training or education in the online space, I think it's going to be an important journey for each and every one of us, whether you are young or not so young.
Thank you, Patrick. I like that. The point of young and not so young, and certainly this work ahead. We're going to address that in just a bit too. Danny, go ahead.
No, I think a lot of the points that, I was waiting. I thought you had a question for me, but I think I totally resonate with a lot of points that both Dean and Patrick just mentioned.
Okay, great. I wanted to come over to Manjula for a bit here. What do you think? You talked about how your career shifted and that you were able to make moves. And then now you're working cross-culturally, across the world on initiatives. We've also heard that problem solving, storytelling, communication, collaboration, so forth. Do you feel like this is the right list? And what have you found in your experience has brought you to success, Manjula?
Yeah, I've been thinking about Dean's comment a bit. Actually, one of the things I think we should do is define what does young mean. I really believe, and actually it's testament to Danny's story, Dean's story. Patrick, I don't know your story, and you probably are, you know, you're probably like 70 or something, but you look amazing. And you know, but one of the key themes was that we kept reinventing ourselves, actually. And actually what I think where we are in the world today, it's being young at heart. It's being willing, as Danny said, to reinvent yourself, to learn, to continuously learn and say, how can my life's purpose and how can I contribute to the world that I live in, to society and the planet? So, you know, my story has definitely been one of collaboration, creativity, to Patrick's point, complex problem solving. And you don't have to do it by yourself. You know, a lot of you who are thinking about being a founder or starting your own business, you know, you don't have to have all the answers to start. And actually, the more you don't have the answer and the bigger problem you're trying to solve, the more rewarding and the more profitable, and I mean that by social, economic, and environmentally profitable, it can be for you and your organization. And creativity is a huge part in this, is that we, you know, look at us, our own body is one of the greatest systems ever created, right? And actually, if we look to ourselves as that great system, well, creativity is how we actually invent and innovate and create new systems and new problem solving. And when I say creativity, look to nature as well. Nature has so much in it that we can use to problem solve for the future. And the final point I wanted to make is we can't solve the future with backward thinking or looking backwards. We have to look at it. We have to bring the future into the now and say, okay, what are the complex problems we have to solve for now? And being in the work that I am, we have the greatest problems to solve of this generation. You know, we have to solve poverty, we have to solve inequality, injustice, housing, water, education, health and well-being. We have to solve renewable energy. We have to solve all these huge problems. And the final point I want to make is that remember I said, like, I was asking the economist, have you proven the economic argument of sustainability? Well, the data that I found that started a worldwide generation was that companies that were aligned to sustainability, whether they knew it or not, were outperforming on the stock market by 11%. Just by greening up and making their supply chains more efficient, they were doing 14 times more revenue. The millennials and the Gen Z were going to select brands and leaders that could prove their impact on society and the planet. And they were inheriting one of the largest sums of capital of any generation in human history that would unlock something like 12 trillion global growth per annum, never seen of any generation before. And so, you know, I want to urge you, when you're thinking about your purpose, when you're thinking about reinventing yourself, when you're thinking about problem solving, when you're thinking about creativity, well, this is, look to these huge problems that the world's facing with right now, but look at it from the ability that actually the greatest problems that you're going to solve is going to attract the greatest market share, because they're so complex and so huge. And look at the world around you and bring that collaboration together. Governments need to work with business needs to work with governments, business needs to work with civil society. Citizens, you have the greatest power right now. It's your voting, your vote, and your choice is your voice. And so this is the greatest movement in history. We absolutely can reinvent ourselves. And I'm looking at like people like Dr. Lillian on here and others, Anthony Hayward, I can just see your cameras on, but you are the young as well, right? If you can be young at heart and you can reinvent yourselves. We have some people in my company that are 70 years old and they were about to retire. And I was like, no, you need to come
I would like to respond to that if I may.
Yeah, sure. And Danny, if you want a job, we need some more physicists to solve these great challenges.
Yeah, if I may, I did want to make a positive point about age, which I think is just a number, and come back to Dean Tong's point about soft skills. I mean, that term is interesting to me because I run a company called Hard Skills, but we teach soft skills because we believe soft skills are the hard skills.
Beautiful.
And why they're the hardest skills is that they are about behavioral change. And
that's right.
There's no magic bullet to behavioral change. Most people do not find critical thinking, collaboration, creativity, inclusion, self-awareness, curiosity that naturally, it doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. And to train those people, it can be done, but it needs a science-based approach where you get into the cognition of the individual learner. But just a quick point, we do this across 40 countries for a number of companies, but the interesting thing is the data shows through our programs that the people with 15 plus years experience, which is a key issue here in Singapore, are actually some of the most committed yet learners. This is an absolute myth. It's an absolute myth that more senior people can't. A lot of managers who are looking for jobs at the moment, they can be trained, and we have the data to prove that. So I always like to join things where I see that was the subject of discussion. So apologies for being late into the conversation.
Yeah, thank you for that encouragement there. There is a question from the floor and a logistics item as well. So before Candice, we come to your question, I've just been informed that the panel can be extended until 4:20, but I would like to check with the panelists. Are you able to wait and be with us until 4:20? Manjula?
Yes, I love you so much. I've got to run across the road to Cobb.
Okay, thank you so much. Sure. Danny? No, Dean?
I will change my plans.
Thank you. And Patrick?
4:15, I have a next meeting, so.
4:15, okay. We will call this panel at 4:15. I appreciate everyone. And there's a question from Candice here. She said, it's heartwarming to hear that mature workers still have a future, but many hiring managers are only looking to hire young staff, especially in IT tech sector. Wow, okay. So from experience, who would like to address this question?
I think Patrick can share with you some of the programs that the government has put in place in order to encourage companies to actually take in mid-career, as well as even some of the more senior employees.
Yeah. Thanks, Dean, for the introduction. But seriously, I think that there are two groups, two segments, because each time we talk about tech talents, I think there are two groups. I mean, one that are really, very deep tech talents. That's one segment. The other segment are people who are aware, highly aware and have a working knowledge of what are the deep IT skills or IT frameworks or programming languages, but more importantly, have relevant domain knowledge. Because in whatever space you operate, particularly the fintech space, if you are selling a product, for example, to an oil and gas company, you would want someone who has the domain expertise in the oil and gas space to be able to sell your product and connect with the buyer of your product or your services. So this is one example where when I speak to many of the fintech players, well, I will steal the thunder from the Fintech Talent Report, which should be announced tomorrow morning by the Singapore Fintech Association. But yeah, in short, basically there's a demand for fintech talents, and I like to say that it's in two groups. Of course, the deep tech talent, and the other one is people with domain expertise. So many of them may not be those that are very, very young. They may be those who are in a mid-career or who have in sectors where they may have been disrupted for a variety of reasons, and looking at opportunities to segue into something in the adjacent sector or even a completely new sector. So I think many of us, including those on this panel, have encountered and have interfaced with many of them and have conversations with them as well. I think they bring with them a lot of skills, a lot of domain expertise in the particular sector which they have been in for the last 10, 15, maybe even 20 years. So I think a lot of the fintech companies that I know are really looking for talent and abilities, not just in the deep tech space, but also in domain expertise, so that when they have products and propositions, they can then enter into these various sectors and industries, which some of these mid-careers or mid-career hires or more those with vast experiences will be able to do a better job in engaging their clientele as well as the customers. And as Dean shared earlier, there are actually quite a number of programs already available. Keith can do some soft selling later of his program at NUS, but also across the various spaces in Institute of Banking and Finance Singapore, and of course Workforce Singapore, Skills Future Singapore, even the labour movement. I think there's no shortage of support as well as skills upgrading training opportunities. I think the key is whether you want to embrace it and really latch on to all these opportunities that are available. And over and above this skills training and funding and support, there's also quite a number of incentives for employers and businesses. You could be a micro SME, you can be a SME, you could be a large local enterprise, or even a multinational. There's actually quite existing very, very generous support grants in the form of a few programs. Prior to COVID-19, it was called the Career Support Program. Now it's called the Jobs Growth Incentive, which will last to March next year, which I'm lobbying for it to continue to make it a permanent kind of like a funding system to support employers to hire workers, in fact, all ages, with a bit more generous funding for those who are not so young, and really to the tune of as much as 40% of their annual package, subject to a cap. And in the financial sector, I'm glad to share because I know Dean and team are also participating in it. In this pilot project where we are trying to incentivize employers to well, in a way, try out fresh employees, could be mid-careers, etc., to see whether they have appetite, whether they have the attitude, and of course the competencies or the aptitude to be able to pick up some of the skills in the growth areas in our various parts of the financial sector, including the fintech space. So these are some of the ecosystem support that is provided for employers as well as employees, because yes, it can become in the form of funding support to the employer, but actually in a way, when the employers increasingly hard to find plug and play kind of employees, well, there's all these fundings would serve to motivate, encourage, and lessen the impact, burden, and cost to employers when they want to try out some employees which they feel maybe not perfect fit, but maybe a 50% chance of making it into the sector. So these are some of the program offerings and support systems that are available. And I'm glad to share that I think there's a general tenacity to want to do this on a more sustainable and a longer term way.
So maybe that's the question from me, right, to you, Patrick. I think you brought up some really good points, right? For example, you say that getting the technology in place is only part of the equation, right? At the end of the day, to make any impact, somebody needs to have the soft skills to convince, let's say, the CEO that this is something that's worth selling, and to convince the client that this is something that's worth buying. So the question is, are we doing enough to change the mindsets of the employers so that they look at recruitment not just as recruiting for someone to fill a certain role with a certain specific set of skills, which is more about vocational training. If you're a computer science major, you can do programming and not anything else. But maybe take a more holistic view to say, does this person have the fundamental skills of learning, fundamental skills of sort of reinventing himself or herself, the broader creative thinking skills, the broader collaboration influencing skills. Because I think that's key to this whole journey, right, of getting the whole ecosystem to embrace this new breed of workers who may not have the deep technical training to begin with, but can actually pick it up along the way, but also comes with these additional skills that the soft skills that we mentioned are so important to having a successful career and also making real impact within the organization.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Danny. I mean, look at the four of us, Manjula, Dean, you and me, you know, from consultancy to physics, to business, to law, but we are all doing something different from what we used to do or should train in. So it goes to show that actually, I think, you know, the basic training and the foundational skills, you know, gives you that grounding. At the end of the day, whether you move into this next job or next opportunity or this growth industry, very, very much depends on whether you're open to it and how you feel you can make a difference. And at the end of the day, I think the key, most important word, I think some of us unconsciously mentioned it, is mindset. Mindset of employers as well as employees. I think everyone plays an important role and part. So I can't emphasize more. And the biggest challenge is mindset and mental models are the hardest to shift and change. So I think it's going to be a journey, and we are all on this journey to you know, make sure everyone have a more agile, adaptable, and a more resilient mindset. Yeah.
May I add something?
Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Keith. Yeah, just coming back to Danny's point, I think one of the reasons that senior leaders sometimes don't invest in this is that traditionally, I mean, the two biggest overused words in corporate education is learning and skills, because most training actually for behavioral skills doesn't work. It's tactical and it goes into short-term memory and people forget it after 2 weeks. And what's happening now in the market, I think, is finally there is we're at a bellwether, we're at an inflection point where the market is starting to understand that unless you understand how to change adult behaviors through the right kind of structured training, then it's all a waste of time. And there's especially things like mindset, right? You won't change mindset by having people watch videos or go to 2-day courses or whatever. It needs to be an intentional learning approach with data to show the C-suite the behavioral change. And that's what your EdTech 2 is all about, is the data to show the outcome of the behavioral change. And frankly, most of the market, it's been slow to happen, but it's starting to happen now, I'm glad to say.
Okay,
if I may jump in here, Keith.
Go ahead, Dean.
No, so to answer Danny's question, right, in terms of organization investing in some of these reskilling. So I cannot miss the opportunity to advertise a little bit of what we're doing at UOB. So there was a program called Better You that we launched 3 years ago. And the aim is essentially to build this set of skills. If you're looking from a pure return on investment perspective, you realize that you're not going to get an immediate return on investment. In fact, it's actually quite hard to prove the economics of doing some of this because it takes a while for you to build up these skills. It's not like, you know, you send them to a 1-week course and suddenly overnight, you know, they will actually switch it on. And some of the people that you train may not even stay with you for long, right? But it is a belief from a management perspective that, you know, this is the right thing to do. And if you don't do it, for most part of the organization, the people who stay with you will be much worse off, right? And this Better You program that we offered focus on 5 areas, starting with growth mindset, just changing the way you think about learning, right? Second is digital awareness, letting them understand what is actually happening around them. Then we talk about complex problem solving. That's the third area that we actually put in here. Human-centered design, because for you to beat the technology, you need to be more human. So it's really how do you use the humanity as a competitive advantage. And last but not least, it's actually on data. storytelling and analytics, right? So again, these are actually from our perspective, softer in nature, don't have immediate return, but it sets the foundation, if you will. It fertilizes the ground for when you see a better clarity in terms of how a job will change. This is where you invest in the hard skills training, right? So what we have been doing is that for all our employees, we're laying that foundation. Anyway, I couldn't miss the opportunity to do some advertisement.
Thank you, Dean. And man, I'd love to see the details, or like if you have any website or anything on that as well. Dean, thank you. Manjula, you wanted to add something in?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I mean, I'm obviously a CEO of a fintech company, and we've had to recruit from the ground up, from me to where we are now all over the world. And I had to make a really conscious decision around diversity, equity, inclusion, even though I am a CEO of women, female woman of color, not from a technology background. And so number one was being conscious about it. And that diversity and equity and inclusion involved across every single department, even though we're a technology company. I actually say to my company, to everyone in my company, we're not a technology company. Actually, we're a well-being company. We help, nations, organizations, citizens reach peak performance and sustainability. And that takes a diverse mindset and a diverse workforce to think through how do we bring people to wellness. And so we have, this intergenerational policy. What I realized, a lot of the millennials and Gen Z that were coming into our organization, or that we found were super, talented, very passionate about the topic. I felt like they didn't necessarily have the same, convictions that I had, where we had to kind of go up the ranks. Like we had to do our dues to get from one level to the next level to the next level. Like a lot of millennials are getting fast tracked quite significantly in companies these days. And so we had to actually bring in the 60s, 70, 50-year-olds to come and help be that guide and mentor of how these graduates had to get to their next levels. I think a lot of them were like, hey, I should be the CEO, or I should be in C-suite like today. And it's like, well, actually, you've got to learn these different skill sets, right? You've got to learn these different experiences. Even though you're super bright and could potentially run the company, you still have to go through these life lessons. And so we actually created mentorship programs within the organization to help those that were is potentially going out into retirement to come back in and help those that are coming into the workforce. And so, that just wanted to share that I think having a really diverse workforce really helps with also changing some of those cognitive biases and those, those programs that we've all had to say, well, actually, women cost us more money because they're going to go off and have a baby, and and the older are going to be costing us more money because they're going to be retiring soon, and we're going to be investing in them, but they're going to be leaving. All of those mindsets are completely wrong. And actually, we have to say, no, diversity is the name of the game. We need different mindsets, different belief systems, different thoughts, creativity, skills, strengths to the table to solve these complex problems. And that's why the young has to be a continuum, across all generations to be able to solve these issues, particularly in fintech, actually, particularly in technology companies.
Young at heart, flexible to learn and work together. Let me ask for concluding remarks. This has been an amazing discussion. We're almost at time here. So can I get 30 seconds from each of the speakers here? I'd like to start off first with Patrick, if you could give us some concluding remarks here.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Keith. I can emphasize more. Earlier on, we talked about mindsets. I think that's very, very important. And well, for some of you here who will be tuning into this, the future of fintech is bright, yeah, for sure. And of course, the other conclusion for me is, the future is not just to the young, but the not so young. But whether you are young or not so young, very, very, very important. I think I can't emphasize more to stay really relevant and resilient, really the new skills relevant to the new jobs, at the same time resilient to the many changes that are being hurled at us. Thanks.
Thank you. Manjula?
Yeah, I just want to say something to Singapore. I think I've been watching Singapore, and you are making some incredible moves globally that will position you, I think, in the jewel of the crown of Asia. You have an incredible opportunity to lead, and your values will drive you forward. Your value are built on a nation of incredible values. And I just want to encourage everyone who's listening to this panel to go for it. Look at the green fintech ambitions that your nations has put their sort of, their goals behind, and really find your place in that ecosystem. If you're the XY and the baby boomers, you want to leave a planet for the next generation that you're proud of. If you're Gen Z millennial, you want to be part of a planet that's going to just continually to have a legacy for you and for others that are coming behind you. So I just want to encourage Singapore, particularly, go for it. Fintech, green fintech, especially, like I'm here, I'm going to help you. We're going to all join forces to solve some of the world's greatest ills. And so I just want you to, go for it. Be young in that, be young in that movement.
Thank you so much. Dean?
If I were to leave you with a message, it will be that the future is actually one that we have to share, the multi-generation workforce. And in order to make that work, I think there are, in my mind, two common denominators. One, as we have talked about so far, is finding the purpose that unites the different generations together, and making that purpose a personal one for every individual within the organization. The second one, no matter what age we are, we all want to feel to be valued. I told a personal story recently about my dad, who was a car salesman, and at one stage he was a top salesman. And he won a trip to Tokyo Disneyland, and it was a big deal because at that point in time, the furthest he has been to was Singapore, and we are in Malaysia. But as he grew older, his productivity started to decline to a point where he was sidelined and finally let go. But it was not the letting go part that actually killed him inside. It was being sidelined, feeling unwanted, feeling unimportant. So to make this work for our multi-generation, we have to make sure that everyone needs to feel that they are being valued.
That's a very good point, value. And Danny, come to the last point.
I will be short and crisp. I'll come back to my three main points. Number one, learn how to learn and don't stop learning. Number two, be fearless, be tenacious, and be purposeful. And last but not least, don't be afraid to reinvent yourself. Because if we do this, then I think the future belongs to all of us, and age is just a number.
Thank you so much, everyone. Can I just ask for all the audience, if you'd like to turn your pictures on, we'll very quickly take a camera shot here in 5, 4, 3. This is how long it takes for me to fix my hair, so that's why it's very quick. 2, 1. All right, here's our picture here. Thank you so much. And just to wrap up here, really great comments from the speakers this afternoon. Creative thinking, communications, collaboration, problem solving, some of the key words. We kept on hearing tenacity over and over again. I love the foundation of feeling valued. So true. And that's what a lot of advisory board memberships and more type of consulting type roles. Just because your productivity and day-to-day is going down doesn't mean the thinking has changed at all. Many times I can tell you I want to outplay my boys in basketball, but nowadays my body is like, what are you doing? Slow down, just stand on the side and root them on or something. And so we've got to be able to recognize that multi-generational connection. We concluded today that the future doesn't belong to the young in age, It belongs to the young at heart. And so we're going to go across all generations and do that. This was great. Thank you so much, speakers. Well done. Let's give them a round of applause for hanging in there as well. And by all means, also, I got permission ahead of time that the speakers were okay with sharing their LinkedIn addresses. So I'm just going to post that here. If you wanted to reach out and have additional questions for the speakers or what have you, by all means, they're available for that, but just be respectful of their time. And also, I would be remiss, we do have, without mentioning the schedule ahead. And so we have here this is day one of the Talent Pavilion, Singapore FinTech Festival and Switch. And so right now going on is Fintech Essentials, as well as we have some mid-career folks sharing their NUS FinTech SG projects over in room 9. So to continue and even see what some people are doing to transform themselves, hop over into room 9 or take a look at Fintech Essentials. What do you need to get into this sector? And room 8. And then we've got by the Fintech Association, which was Fintech Academy, sorry, which Dr. Lillian Cole announced in the chat, Fintech in the New Normal. They'll be up at 5 o'clock for you to carry through some of that as well. And finally, as Patrick mentioned, as part of all this, we do have a program here called the NUS FinTech SG program. We have an information session coming up November 12th at 3 p.m. Come on out if you'd like to see what it takes to get into this industry too. It's an intense program, that's for sure, but we have had some of our graduates presenting and actually going into many banks and other organizations. So I'm going to add that link in here too. So with that, thank you again for joining us at this session. Thanks for speakers for coming, and have a nice day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
See you ahead.
Thank you.